Hello and welcome. Back in April, we got some new baby chicks to add to our existing flock. Now, the chicks are growing up and we need to get them integrated into the new flock. And with this many chickens, I wanted to add some new features to the coop to make life a little easier when feeding and watering the chickens, as well as help improve their overall health. In this video, I'll show you how we integrated the new chicks in with the older hens, swapped their old roost for a better design that will hopefully help promote good health, then changed their feeder system to make the task of feeding a bit easier, and finally added a rain gutter watering system for both inside and outside of the coop. Part of integrating the new pullets with the other chickens was the placement of the mini coop in the run of the main coop, so that the two groups would be close to each other, but not so close that the older hens would pick on the little ones. It was time to move the 8 new young chicks into the main coop. We did this at about 12 weeks. The idea is the new pullets should be almost the same size as the rest of the hens, so perhaps they won't get picked on as much. When we moved the pullets to their new home, we did it after chicken bedtime. We carried the pullets from the mini coop one at a time and placed them on the roosts in the big coop with all the other chickens already roosted and snoozing. There is of course some pecking when we brought the new birds in, but there's always a little pecking on the roosts at bedtime. It is called the pecking order after all. We just wanted to make sure there was no excessive bullying, where one chicken, or more, may target another chicken and do some real harm. This group seemed to be fairly well accustomed to each other, and we had no serious issues with the introduction. Once the pullets were all in the big coop, we could close everything up for the night and let them sleep. We watched them fairly close for a couple of days, just to be sure no one was being overly aggressive, and everything went well. The roosts that we placed them on are a big change for the coop. The previous roost was all at one level, and it was too high, though there was a step-up jump for the chickens to get up there. The main issue is all the places the 2x4s connect are great hiding places for scaly leg mites, a pest that does harm to the chickens' feet. The new design will hopefully have fewer places for mites to hide. It's also a good idea to clean or change your chicken roosts every so often. Having a cleaner sleeping surface is much better for their health. I wanted the new roost to be a ladder type. It seems like a better setup than what we have. I did a bit of measuring in the coop and decided I would make the roost 4 feet wide and 8 feet long, with roughly a 45-degree angle. In the barn, I cut a 2x4 to 4 feet and attached it to a post at the height I wanted it to be in the coop. Checked for level, then cut angles on the pieces for the sides and attached them to the 2x4 on the post. With the sides attached, I started cutting the rest of the 4-foot sections and adding them to the sides. I placed each roost 12 inches down from the previous one, because it seems like all measurements for chickens are 12 inches. Their nesting boxes are 12 by 12. So if it's good enough for the nesting box, then I hope it's good enough for sleeping. I ended up with 6 roosts on my chicken ladder. This should be enough space for all of our flock, and possibly a few more. I pulled the ladder off the post and put it on the John Deere. Not that one. Yeah, that one. And then drove it out to the coop. Now it's time to rip out the old roost to make room for the new one. A dusty chicken coop in the middle of summer is not a fun place to be, but the work needs to be done. And while I'm here, I should probably clean out the coop as well. It's really dusty. With a fresh layer of shavings down, I can add the new roost. With the roost in, I wanted to make feeding a little easier. We currently fill a medium-sized bucket from the metal can we keep the chicken feed in and take it into the chicken area and fill up the feeder. It's a standard feeder that's hung from a rope along with the water. It's about 2 trips with the bucket to fill the feeder. I want to be able to add feed without going into the chicken area, so I'm adding 3 PVC style feeders. I'll cut a hole in the wire mesh between the 2 zones for part of the feeder to fit through so the chickens can access them and we can fill them without going into the chicken area. I already have a bit of PVC pipe around the barn, so for this I only needed to get a few new 45-degree Ys, some connectors, and some caps. I cut the PVC pipes to length on the miter saw, joined the other pieces together, and brought them out to the coop. This is all dry fit and not glued. It should need glue to stay together. The PVC piping that I have was not all the same color, but I bet the chickens don't mind, and I don't either. I cut a hole in the chicken wire between the two sides of the coop and then placed the feeders on a piece of 2x4 to raise it up to the right height for the chickens. Then I attached it with some metal strapping. That's about it for the feeders. I filled them up, showed a few chickens where the food was, and the rest figured it out pretty fast. The watering system was much more work than the feeders. I wanted the water to be as hands-off as possible, so a rain barrel setup made sense to me. We get a lot of rain for most of the year, so we won't have to fill the water at all for about 8 months of the year. We do get some freezing temperatures in the winter months, so a rain barrel setup will need to be drained, and we'd have to use the small heated drinker that we use in the winter. We already have a rain barrel and enough PVC piping to do the job, but I would have to get some sort of automatic chicken waterer like the nipples or the cups. I went with the cups. To me, it looks easier to get a drink from one of these cups than it is to get a drink from a poultry nipple. I wanted to have water in the coop, but also some outside in the run. So I came up with this piece of abstract art. Each section will have 6 cups. I drilled some holes for the cups with a 3/8 inch bit. The bit from the pocket hole jig seems to be a good fit. I hope I didn't dull it too much by drilling into the PVC. It seems pretty soft, so hopefully it'll be fine. I put some Teflon tape on the threads of the watering cups and attached them to the PVC. They're self-tapping, you just have to turn them in. Then I discovered that my method of drilling holes was not very accurate, and the cups did not line up too well, so I ended up doing that again. With all the cups added into the PVC and the piping all dry fit and ready, I made a little awning for the watering cups on the outside of the coop to keep them out of the weather. The awning also serves as something to mount the PVC piping too. I figured out the length I had set for the awnings was too long, but I'd already started to assemble the frame. So I used this Japanese pull saw to try to trim the 2x4 flush with the 2x2. The saw works really well. I ended up with a pretty square and clean cut. Now I'll mount the PVC to the frame with the metal strapping. Then, for a little decorative touch, I used some of the cutoffs from the Coop shutters that were left over from the Big Coop build. You can check out the Big Coop build here if you're interested. Now for the awning itself. I just used some 2x2 scraps to make some little triangles to attach some beveled cedar boards to. This is the same stuff that I used on a Mini Coop build. Here's a link for that if you want to check it out. The outside watering station is done, and it's ready to attach to the outside of the coop. But first, maybe a little paint. I use the same blue stain that's already on the shutters and the door for the Big Coop. I also added some protection to the cedar boards for the awning. It's almost time to attach all of this to the coop. First, I bent a few metal straps to attach the PVC pipe inside the coop. Now, everything goes in the John Deere trailer and out to the coop. I started inside the coop and drilled a hole in the wall at my selected height. This is where the PVC pipe will pass through so we can get water into the coop. Once I have my hole drilled, I can attach the rest and make sure the bend in the PVC lines up with a new hole in the side of the coop. Now I mounted the other PVC with the watering cups on the inside and pushed the pipe through to the outside, where I can now cut this pipe to length and add the elbow to connect it all together. The cedar roof goes on next. This part is done now. Time to let the glue dry and start to work on the stand for the rain barrel. I'm putting the barrel on the shady side of the coop. Since the barrel is black, I want to keep it out of the sun as much as I can. I'm guessing the chickens would prefer not to have hot water in their drinking cups. The side of the coop that is in the shade also happens to be where the ground slopes away and the coop is propped up on blocks. The water barrel has to be above the water pipes inside the coop, so my barrel stand is going to have to be pretty tall. The stand will end up being 4 feet tall, and it has to be strong to hold the 55-gallon barrel filled with water. The full barrel weighs about 450 pounds. The legs will be 4x4 posts, and the rest will be 2x4s. I cut 2 4x4 posts in half to make the legs. Then, I wanted a chance to work with the Japanese pull saw some more, so I decided I would notch out the top of the posts for the 2x4s to attach to them. So I marked a line and started cutting. Some of the cuts turned out fairly well, while some were not quite straight. But for this project, a crooked cut or two would not affect the structural strength of it. It was quite a lot of work to hand cut all 4 posts, but eventually I got it done. I also notched out a spot for some lower braces to help stabilize the table. For this part, I used the table saw. I made a bunch of cuts, then chiseled away the excess so the 2x4 cross bracing will fit. I did this to all 4 legs. Now I build a square frame out of 2x4s that will attach to the top. With that, it's time to put it all together. With everything attached and square, I need to cut some 2x4s to go across the top for the barrel to sit on. I pre-drill some holes and attach the top. I left some spaces between the boards so water won't sit on top of the stand when it rains. I now have my stand. It's heavy and it seems to be quite strong. I think it'll hold the rain barrel without any issues. Now it's time to put the stand in its place. Of course, into the John Deere trailer it goes, and I also need a shovel so I can level the ground where it will sit. I drove all this out to the coop and started digging. For anyone who doesn't know, if you have any kind of farm, large or small, there's always a lot of digging. So get a good shovel. With the ground mostly level, I added and leveled the 4 pieces of concrete that the legs will sit on. My stand is in place and ready for the barrel. The barrel will have an overflow drain near the top and a tap at the bottom that I can connect a garden hose to. The hose will run directly into the PVC pipe to supply the water to the chickens. To get water in the barrel, I needed to add some gutters to the coop. With those on, I started working on getting the water into the barrel. To cut my downspouts, I used a hacksaw, but they can be tough to cut square with a hacksaw. So I added some painter's tape and used that as a guide. It was easier to stay in the middle of the tape all the way around the downspout than it would be to mark a line all the way around and try to follow that. It worked well for me and I got some decently square cuts. Now we have everything done. And, as if on cue, the day after it was all in place, we got our first rainfall in several weeks, so I had a good chance to test it all out. Everything seems to be working as it should. One of the 12 watering cups does have a leak, so I had to remove that and cap it until I can get another one to replace it, but there's still plenty of water for all the chickens. The coop will be a little easier to maintain now. Feeding is quicker, and for 8 months of the year, we don't even have to touch the water. And the chickens appear to be happy with their new roosts. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you found it helpful in some way. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. Consider subscribing if you think I've earned it, and thanks for watching.